Hi, my name is Reed Silverne, and the name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal employee. Proud of it. As you know, I've been working on trying to enter the 21st century, and I have a live internet behind me. That's another webcam. I've been doing a different webcam every week. This one is a bar in South Carolina, and apparently those folks are right in there right now. The picture will update every 15 seconds, so you should see some activity behind me. Eventually, I'll get it to the point where I have real stuff happening. I've been trying to bring up a game behind me, but I haven't quite gotten that figured out yet, so that might be for a different week. But we're working on that and trying to get into the 21st century, trying to get live internet on the internet. Is that working? There you go.
Last two. Okay.
Yeah. So everything's just going great, and here we are. Today I'm going to talk about a little bit more of what I talked about yesterday, or last week rather. And if you saw it at all, you probably saw it on Sunday or Tuesday. My show is actually taped on Fridays now, so I'm no longer live. And so I'll be doing something on Friday. So I'm going to say once and for all about a holiday, Happy Mother's Day, and you probably are going to see this on Sunday, so it really will be Mother's Day. So Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, and Happy Mother's Day to all the wives and ladies who are mothers but are being wished Happy Mother's Day by people who aren't their kids, and Happy Mother's Day to all the grandmas and so on and so forth. You notice that the bar just changed over there, and some guy is walking by with his beer. So that's the bar in South Carolina, and what's going on in South Carolina this very minute is actually being seen this very minute, although it's not really being seen live by you because you're not going to see this until 2, 3, or 5 days away. So what's going on? What happened and what I talked about last week, and it just happened right before I did my show, so I didn't have a lot of facts, was Porter Goss, the head of the CIA, was summarily fired or resigned and left the agency and was given a medal in Congress the next day. So he was the head of the CIA. There didn't appear to be any problems outstanding. He had gone before a major congressional meeting a few days before. Nothing was said to the members of the congressional committee, and next thing you know, he's gone. Well, I think that we found out why, and it doesn't have anything to do with him personally, although he was very unpopular at the CIA. He was a congressman who was elected to Congress as a Republican and had been a former CIA agent. So when he left Congress, he was appointed to be the head of the CIA, this is Porter Goss, and to clean the agency up before he left. So right after 9/11 and after all of the failures of 9/11, he was put in there, I think, about 18 months ago, and 20 months ago, and he became head of the CIA. He brought a bunch of his cronies. Now, his cronies were his congressional staffers, but most of those folks were ex-CIA agents. However, what ended up happening, and what's come out since, is that the number 3 guy, in other words, the executive director of the CIA, who was 2 levels below him, had been fired a few days before. And it's very, very interesting because he was fired because he's being investigated in the same investigation that a guy named Randy Duke Cunningham got caught up with. Randy Duke Cunningham was a congressman who was in the Intelligence Committee and who was very, very friendly with a company in San Diego that made equipment for the intelligence community. And those guys were giving him, they were putting him up for free on a yacht, so he didn't have to pay rent when he was in Washington. They were giving him all kinds of gifts. They were sending him on trips. They were sending him around in their private jet. It ended up that the benefits that he had been given, this Randy Duke Cunningham, had been given by this company was worth over $1 million. He was very, very friendly with the president of the company and another one of the associates of the president who owned another company. They made some kind of computer equipment, is a guy named Wilkes. And it ends up that the number 3 guy in the CIA, who had been appointed by Porter Goss, who was also a congressman, and who was also apparently mixed up with the same group, had been going to poker parties with a guy named Wilkes, who was one of the principals in the investigation of Randy Duke Cunningham. And Randy Duke Cunningham was, even though he was indicted, and I think that he pled guilty and was convicted, there were 2 other principals of there, and this is one of the principals who was holding these parties. And at these parties, according to some reports, there was poker, there was cigar smoking, and a non-smoking floor. And according to some people, there was all kinds of other illicit activities that had to do with ladies that were invited to these poker parties to, I guess, I'm not going to go the next step, but there were ladies involved who were not the wives of the people at the poker party and were paid for by this company. So it's a pretty nasty scandal. Not a lot of money involved, but we don't know whether this guy, the number 3 guy in the CIA, had returned favor for favor. And this guy's name was Fogo, and let's see what his name was Kyle Fogo, and his nickname was Dusty. And he had been all over the world, Tegucigalpa, Honduras, which was, you know, the one of the locations, Panama, locations from the old Sandinista, Iran-Contra scandal. He had been in the Middle East. He had been in Frankfurt, Germany. And it appeared that he had done business with a company, or steered business to a company called, I believe, Archer Logistics, that had done business with this fellow Wilkes, who was behind these particular parties. Now, what has Fogo done? That hasn't come out yet. Is Fogo guilty of anything? Certainly has not come out yet. But the fact that he was fired on a Tuesday, 3 days before the head of the CIA, who appointed the guy, Porter Goss, who was not accused of being involved in this little mini scandal, quit. So there's a lot of suspicion that this might be the icing on the cake. Apparently, the senior CIA agents had been quitting left and right. The senior management of the CIA quit en masse when Porter Goss came in there, that he may not have been very effective at running that agency, and that people in the agency called people like Kyle Fogo and his appointees, Porter Goss's appointees, goslings. Gosling is a baby goose, and of course you can imagine that that's pretty belittling to the people that he had appointed. So what's the bottom line of that? The bottom line is that there's more to, in fact, there might be a fire underneath the smoke of which is that Porter Goss all of a sudden quit out of nowhere without any warning to anybody. And his replacement is a 4-star general. And the 4-star general is named General Michael Hayden. And what is Michael Hayden? I've talked about this in the past too. Why? He was the ex-chief of the NSA. Now the NSA is another one of what they call the alphabet agencies, CIA, FBI, NSA, and so on and so forth. And it's called the National Security Agency. It was stood up in 1952, back in the days of Truman and Eisenhower. And its purpose was to make sure that our communications and our security is secure. And it's done a great job. Everybody says so. And actually, in a way, being head of the NSA and then going to become chief of the CIA, even though the CIA is a much more famous agency, is kind of a demotion. The reason it's kind of a demotion is the NSA has a bigger budget. Bigger budget, more people, and the CIA is actually a smaller agency. So Hayden has gone, and now he's been set forward by Mr. Bush to be the future chief of the CIA to replace Porter Gross. And then right here in the USA Today on Thursday is a big, big story that not only has the NSA been looking at phone calls between Americans who make phone calls or emails to foreign countries in order to find Al-Qaeda, which is what they said before. And when that particular, what they call foreign surveillance scandal, I guess you might call it, or controversy came up about 6 months ago, I think it was last October, and I talked about it a couple times back then. That controversy came out, they said it is only calls and information about people that have communicated overseas, that there is no domestic to domestic information being kept or surveillance being done. Well, it's just come out that that's not true. What they've done is the NSA, after 9/11, went to all the major phone companies and asked them to turn over the records of every American's phone calls into a giant database. Now, it would take a giant database to collect all of these phone calls. And it's an incredible number of phone calls. Now, they claim that this is external surveillance. Now, external surveillance on phone calls means all the information about the phone call. And that information is what the number is, what the number that was called was, how long the call was, and so on and so forth, and what the date was, and basically all the information in your phone bill, with the exception of your name. Now, the quirk to this whole thing is that there is an FCC law, and an FCC law so important that they can fine a company like AT&T or Verizon or Bell South, the companies that were involved in this particular episode, $135,000 per day per incident for a violation of security of people's phone records. And of course, phone records have always been subject to a court order or a court warrant. So if anybody who watches CSI or any of these shows or Law and Order, there's always a situation where a guy's wife is found dead, and they find out that the guy called, or a lady's husband is found dead. The lady called her boyfriend right before the murder, and right after the murder, the boyfriend called her back, and then they quiz them all, and they find out, oh, gee, the boyfriend was calling from the house where it occurred or something like that. So the crime is solved, and it's solved because of phone records. So here is a database with every American's phone records, with one exception. One company, Q West, which covers the mountain states, including Arizona, refused to comply with the request for a database of every phone record of every American. So there's this big gap here in the mountain states where they don't have this particular phone records. But if you have long distance service with AT&T, or you have a Verizon cell phone, then it's very, very easy. Your phone calls are on record with the NSA. And apparently, in order to build a database with all the phone records since 2001, 5 years of data of every American's phone calls during that whole entire period, is the largest single computer database in the world. Because it has to be larger than AT&T. They only have their employees. or their people's calls. Now, in the past, when Ma Bell was the phone company, it was absolutely forbidden to release any of this information without a court order. Even a single phone record from a single day or a single bill from a single person to see who they were calling, because they felt that that was a violation of their customers' records. But the NSA put a lot of pressure on these companies and said that you are harming the war on terrorism if you don't release all this data. Now, the NSA also shares its data with the DEA, which is the Drug Enforcement Agency, the FBI, IRS, who knows who else. Fact of the matter is, once you have that information, it's going to go to a lot of agencies, so it'll cover a lot more than just Al-Qaeda type folks. It can be used, and it was collected without warrant, for all kinds of crimes and all kinds of suspicion of crimes. However, that hasn't really come up yet. What has come up is the NSA has this giant database. Everybody's phone calls and locations are in it. NSA, or the QS specifically asked NSA, well, why don't you go to FISA or the Justice Department and send us a letter, and then we'll go ahead and do it. And they said, no, we don't want to go through FISA at all. Well, what is FISA? FISA is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and there's a special court with 11 judges, and those judges were shocked that the original surveillance was being done with warrantless. However, that warrantless surveillance that was done, that came out in October, that was limited only to, at least on one end, this is what they said, contact in a foreign country. So it was only a call from America to Pakistan, or a call to America, from America to Jordan, or whatever, or Iraq. However, this is not true now. This is all of the phones, but not the actual content of the phone calls themselves, only that the calls were made. Of course, you can find out a lot about what people's calls are made. You can find out a lot by who they call. Do they have a girlfriend? If they're married, do they have a mistress? All kinds of things. Do they call drug dealers? All kinds of information that could be useful in any kind of investigation of the people and their probity, or criminal activity like drugs or whatever, can be shared out of this database. And usually, and in the past, everybody involved, the FBI, the DEA, all of the federal and law enforcement, ATF, which is firearms agency, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, ATF, all had to get a court order or a warrant in order to go in and get people's phone records. And from phone records, they could say who they were calling and so on and so forth. Now they're saying, well, it's not information that has an identifier on it. That what's illegal is getting information that identifies, has a legal identifier, a name, a social security number, an address, and so on and so forth. However, anybody who wants to go on Dex Online, type into a phone number and click on reverse directory, will get that information. So all they have to do is match it with other public directories, and they can get people's names, their addresses, and from the addresses they can get all of the real estate records, which is all public record too. So most people have their name, or at any rate their company, on the phone records, and from the phone records you can get to that personal identifier information. So they, if 981-5572 calls 555-5373, they can pretty much get the idea that the first number belonged to so-and-so, because that's his cell phone, and the second number belongs to such and such, and that's her cell phone. And they talk for 25 minutes at 3 in the morning. You can imagine what they might have talked about. And I'm sure that they can put 2 and 2 together about a lot of information that can be mined from this database. Now, they're saying they're not mining information, but they are trying to find patterns that might lead to Al-Qaeda people, although it seems like it could get a little narrower than that. Then everybody's phone bill, every single phone call from everybody's phone in 4 different regions of the country, with the exception of Key West, which is the mountain states. And of course, at least as far as the regular phone company is concerned, Arizona didn't get covered. But if you have cell phones, so on and so forth, and any of these major companies are your cell phone company, hey, they got your information. They know that you've been calling your doctor. They know that you've been calling your wife. They know when you've been doing it and who you've been talking to, or at least they can get to the who you've been talking to. Now, most people would say, well, in order to catch terrorists, that's great. I don't care. I have nothing to hide. But, of course, the NSA is part of the federal government, and I am a Fed. I support the Feds, and I think the federal government's doing wonderful things, catching criminals and so on and so forth. But according to the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, there's supposed to be probable cause before the courts give out a warrant in order to violate your privacy. That particular warrant or that particular amendment started with your home, but they've expanded that to mean your phone as well as your home. So up to now, they've been very, very strict that phone records, which can solve crimes, and anybody who watches crime shows on TV have seen that they have solved crimes. In fact, most of the people that have been caught for murder for hire, they've gone through the phone records and they found these phone contacts, and that's part of the evidence against them. And I'm all for that. You need to get evidence against people that are committing crimes. Certainly people that are contacting known Al-Qaeda agents definitely should have records, and definitely should have warrants put out against them. And definitely their phone records should be gone through to see who else they're calling and to find out more about them and what they're up to. However, there are not 200 million out of 300 million Al-Qaeda people. 99.999% of Americans are innocent of at least that particular crime. However, for all we know, they might be sharing that with the IRS, FBI, DEA, ATF, and who knows what other information they can get on you that may lead to this or that or the other. And of course, the worst possible abuse, and I'm not saying that's going on, I think it's very, very unlikely, is to say, well, you know, this guy is critical, or this guy has a problem, or I don't like him, or I don't like his politics. We're going to go through his phone records. We got him right there. We don't need a warrant to get him. Let's just go to the NSA, pull his phone records, and see who he's been calling, do this reverse directory thing, and find out if he has a girlfriend, or if he's been spending money in places that he shouldn't, or if he calls 900 numbers. I mean, it's any number of things that they could look into and find out about that person based on their phone records. That might not be criminal, but might be damaging to their reputation or anything else, and basically get to that guy. For what reason? For business, blackmail, who knows what. So it's an unfortunate situation. I don't think that without a warrant, federal government should have access to every single person in the United States, save customers of Key West, their phone records, who they called, and of course those personal identifiers are obvious. Anybody with a reverse telephone directory you have online. My name is Reed Silverne. The name of the show is Fed Pride. The background is South Carolina. And welcome to my show. I just disappeared so you could see the background for a little bit. And I'll be back. You'll probably see this on Sunday. This is being taped on Friday, and possibly again on Tuesday. And then I'll be back next week for another show. Thank you very much, and thanks for watching.